Chapter 8 The Dragon Slayer's Den. Jesse shared the plan as they rode back home, pausing briefly and then to work out the details. Professor Anderson, St. George was ruled by greed, right? Right, said Daisy. Well then, if you're greedy for dragon blood, that is, what could be better than drinking the blood of one dragon? Daisy thought for a second. Drinking the blood of two dragons, she said. But Jesse, where are we going to get another dragon? That's where the rest of the plan kicks in, said Jesse. He was getting excited. What if we made a new sign? What if the sign said that a lizard, a lot like Emmy, had been found in some other family in Goldmine City? We won't put a phone number on the sign, just an address. It will be a real street, but there won't be a real house number. I like it, said Daisy. While he's out on a wild goose chase, we'll rescue Emmy. But how can we be sure that he'll see the sign? That's the easy part. We'll hang it right under his nose, right outside his office. He won't be able to miss it. Plan? Plan, said Daisy. Making a detour, they rode up into the hills of Old Mine Lane, on the far side of town near the old boarded-up gold mine. People were always getting lost on the winding streets there. The last house on Gold Mine Lane was 499. If they put number 501 on the sign, it would completely flummox St. George. They got home. Jesse ran up to his room and quickly made a new sign. He was careful to make it sound nothing like the first one. While he was busy doing this, Daisy went down to the kitchen and packed her backpack. When they were set to go, Daisy slipped the sign into her wildflower notebook so it wouldn't wrinkle. Then Jesse and Daisy jumped on their bikes and raced back to college. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for the $1 million car. Everyone must be at lunch, Jesse thought. They walked into the zoo through the front door and tacked the sign up on the bulletin board directly across from St. George's lab. They got out of there fast. Feeling very pleased with themselves, Jesse and Daisy hid in the bushes where they had a clear view of the zoo's front door. In silence, they munched energy bars, drank water, and waited. They waited and waited. After a while, Daisy said, "What if he shuts the windows before he leaves?" "I bet he won't. He can't stand that smell," said Jesse. "He needs to keep the place aired out." "But what if he shuts them anyway?" said Daisy. "Then we take a rock and we break the window," said Jesse. Daisy was shocked. "Really? On college property?" Jesse nodded firmly and said, "We're dragon keepers. We do what we have to do." "Right," she said, nodding along. "We also have to figure out where we're going to hide Emmy after we rescue her. 'Cause you know the first place St. George is going to come looking is our house." He said. "Let's not climb Everest before Kilimanjaro, okay?" "Okay." After another long silence, Daisy said, "What time is it, Jess?" Jesse lifted his wrist to check the time. His wrist was completely naked. He wasn't wearing either of his wristwatches. He had no idea what time it was here or in Africa. Daisy grinned and punched him on the arm. "The one day you forget to wear those silly watches." Jesse grabbed her wrist and silenced her as the front door of the zoo swung open. St. George stepped out, once again wearing his black coat, and looked around. Then, with their sign gripped in his hand, he strode purposely in the direction of the parking lot. Jesse and Daisy waited a moment, and then crawled through the bushes to St. George's lab window. They noticed immediately they were all closed. "Darn it," said Daisy. "Hold up," said Jesse. He pushed one of them and it swung open easy. He must have been too excited about the other dragon to lock him. Jesse eased himself through the window, feet first, and lowered himself onto the counter next to the lab sink. Daisy handed the backpack down to him, then joined him at Emmy's cage. "Jessie! Daisy! You came!" Emmy's eyes sparkled. The cousins threw their arms around the cage and did their best to hug her. "Of course we came," Jessie said. He tried to open the cage door, but as he expected, it was locked. "The key's gotta be around here somewhere," Daisy said. "Unless he took it with him," said Jessie. Emmy pointed to her horn toward the door. Her head was the only part of her body that had any space to move. "Look," she said. There was a hook on the wall right next to the door, and hanging from the hook was a big ring of keys. Jessie ran to the big key ring and removed it from the hook. Then he ran back to the cage and with sweaty, fumbling fingers began to insert one key after another. "Hurry," said Daisy over her shoulder, flapping her hands. "I am," said Jessie, but he had always been bad with keys. "Let me try," said Daisy. "I think I got it," said Jessie. The lock clicked and he pulled open the cage door. Jessie and Daisy held the cage while Emmy wiggled and squeezed out like a snake shedding its skin. "Let's get out of here," said Jessie. He held out his arms for Emmy. Emmy backed away. "No," she said. "Come on, Emmy," said Jessie, feeling his patience tested. "I don't have a watch, and I have no idea how long St. George is going to be gone." "Look," said Emmy. He could come back any minute," said Daisy. "Look," said Emmy again. "At what?" "Look at the den," Emmy said. The cousins took their first look around the lab, at the den of St. George the Dragon Slayer. "Holy moly," said Daisy. "I've never seen so many thunder eggs." There were piles and piles of thunder eggs. Everywhere they looked, there were thunder eggs lying in heaps near a huge, grim-looking table, and saw outfitted with a sharp, circular blade. There was a tall trash can overflowing with thunder egg crystals, red, blue, green, purple, every color Jessie could imagine. It was the most beautiful trash can he had ever seen, all mixed up with orange rinds and paper coffee cups. Emmy jumped down from the counter and ran across the lab, her shining green talons clicking smartly against the tile. "Look, look," she said. "Here." Jessie and Daisy followed. Thunder eggs were simmering in pots and on hot plates, pots labeled High Peak, Popocatépetl, Kilauea, Fuji. "Know what these are?" Jessie asked. "They are all volcanoes from different parts of the world." "Look here," said Emmy, running next to the computer, talons clicking. They pulled open the doors of a series of squat white boxes and found more thunder eggs. These were coated with frost and labeled Etna, Shasta, Krakatoa, and on and on. Who knew the world had so many volcanoes? "This is some big deal production he's got going on," said Daisy. "Yeah, I bet he hasn't gotten one dragon yet," Jessie said sullenly. "He had to steal ours." "Can we get out of here now, please?" "No," said Emmy. She darted for the far corner of the room. "Look!" With reluctance, the cousins followed her to a low table made of red leather. "Very nice coffee table," said Jessie, arms folded. "Now can we go?" "Look," said Emmy. "Book." "I see it," said Jessie, "but it's a table." "Book," protested Emmy. Daisy grabbed Jessie's arm and drew him closer. "Look, Jessie Tiger. I mean, really look." He bent down, and with amazement, he saw what he was looking at. It was a book. The cousins circled around in wonder as Emmy looked on, pleased. It was the biggest book they had ever seen. It was bound in rich red leather, with printing stamped in gold ink, and its front cover was a big rusted metal ring that looked like a door knocker. The book was bigger than the ones the librarian used to read them at story hour when they were little. It was bigger than the ancient books that Jessie had seen in museums in London and Paris and Cairo. It was a book that belonged to the library of a giant. Do you think this is Professor Anderson's book? Daisy asked. Jessie frowned. The book's cover didn't seem to have a title, only scratchy-looking letters and designs stamped in ink. If they were words, he certainly weren't in any language that Jessie had ever come across. I don't think so, he said. It's not like this would fit on library shelves, and Mr. Stenson would have said it was this big, or written in another language, whatever it is. You're right, said Daisy, biting her lip. Then I wonder what the book is. Look, said Emmy, hopping up and down. I think she wants you to look inside, said Jessie. There they were, standing next to a thick gold-tooled spine. So they went around to the other side of the book and tried to open the cover. It was too heavy to lift. You take the bottom corner, Jessie said. I'll take the top. Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. But the cover didn't budge. Jessie started looking thoughtfully at the ring. Maybe that's a lock or something. Just then, Emmy scrambled clickety-clack over to the top of the book and landed on the floor between them. Someone come, she said. Go now, go now, go now, go now, go now. They heard footsteps out in the hall. They were coming closer. There was a knock on the door. Jessie squeezed his eyes and shut and held his breath. Dragon and the kids remained rooted in the spot while the person on the other side of the door twisted the knob. They heard footsteps coming back down the hall, and a second later, a thunk-thunk as the front door of the building opened and shut. They exploded into action. Daisy unzipped the backpack, pulled out her yellow rain slicker, and thrust it at Jessie. Jessie wrapped Emmy in it. Emmy let them pick her up without protest now. She had gotten heavier, but they could still hold her easily. I'll make sure there's nobody in the hall, said Daisy. She opened the door, peered out, looking both ways. Then she took a few steps out to the hall. Okay, she called back. Coast clear. Jessie headed out the door, with Emmy in his arms. Before closing the door, he cast a look over his shoulder at the giant book. If only we could take that with us, too. 15 minutes later, they were back at the house in Jessie's bedroom. Jessie, let's get organized, Daisy said, her finger on her chin. We need sleeping bags, water, food, for us and Emmy. What else? Jessie and Daisy's plan was to hide Emmy in the deep woods behind the barn. They had no idea how long they would have to stay there, maybe several days and nights. The deep woods had always seemed a little too scary for sleepouts, but Jessie and Daisy were dragon keepers now, and dragon keepers do what they have to do. They figured once they found a camping spot, Daisy could sneak back to the house and explain to Uncle Joe that they were camping out in the barn for a few days, and ask him to pretty please not tell St. George. It was the best plan they could come up with on short notice. Jessie ran through the bathroom to Daisy's room and pulled their sleeping bags out of the closet, while Daisy hunted around in her brother's closet for old canteens and camping equipment. Emmy was crouched on the carpet by Jessie's bed, crunching away on her head of cabbage. From the separate rooms, the cousins called to each other. Don't forget the flashlight, said Jessie. Right, said Daisy. Make sure it has batteries, said Jessie. We'll need a second backpack, don't you think? Said Daisy. Yeah, what about a two-person tent? Jesse broke off in the middle of his sentence because just then, from Daisy's window, he saw the $1 million car pull up to the curb. Jesse dropped the sleeping bags and tore back through the bathroom to where Daisy was kneeling on the floor of his room, packing a second backpack. Jesse ripped it out of her hands. Never mind about that now. He's here. St. George is here. And that's the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9 is called Hide and Seek.